Hi class, and welcome to the video Understanding the Personal Teacher Narrative. This video will help you understand your next major assignment in the course. First, let's understand what the purpose of this assignment is. It's a lot like the homework that you completed, your journey into teaching, but it's a full paper. It'll help you understand why you're going into teaching, help you to identify your strengths and weaknesses, help you to identify strategies to capitalize on your strengths and overcome or at least ameliorate, that means make better, your weaknesses. The assignment will help you think about the types of students you get along well with and the types that will challenge you. Finally, it will enable you to implement what you learned about APA and writing from Module 2. This is a heavy writing assignment in that a lot of the grading will be focused on your writing. You should know that all the materials that I'll be showing to you are in the Major Assignments folder within the Teacher Narrative folder. That's what it looks like, the top link. If you click on that folder, you'll find this set of instructions, the link to submit, and other helpful materials. Here you see listed the instructions as well as the link to submit. Let's open the instructions and see what they say. First of all, the assignment is broken into two parts, Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1 is due October 17th by midnight, and Part 2 is due a week after I score Part 1, and I'll go over that a little more. This assignment may be submitted up to a week late with a 10% point penalty. It may be revised up to a week after Part 2 is graded. So as I said, this has two parts. Part 1 is to write and submit the narrative, and Part 2 is to read my feedback on what you've written and make changes. You may not submit Part 2 until you submit Part 1 and receive the feedback. The assignment will be graded using a checklist that I'm going to share with you in this video, and it's also in the instructions. So let's see what the instructions say for Part 1. Write a paper describing your journey into teaching, and this is where that homework assignment really comes in handy. You can open it up and see what parts that you want to include and what parts you want to add out and delete. Maybe you want to change some things or add some text. The type of teacher that you want to be one day. Maybe you take your inspiration from a teacher that you had in your past. The strengths and weaknesses that you bring to the classroom and how you may overcome your weaknesses or capitalize on your strengths. Your paper should be 3 to 4 double-spaced pages, but that does not include the title page, the references, or the appendices. You'll recall from our APA lecture that this paper must have a title page, it must have references and an appendix, but the body of the paper, 3 to 4 pages without those things. So what should it include? Title page, as I mentioned, page numbers, 3 to 4 double-spaced pages with the body, at least one level of heading. So remember, first level headings in APA are bolded and centered and capitalized the first letter of important words like books. One or more citations. So that might be confusing to some of you. It could be an article or your textbook or another source from the web, but what should it be about? Well, you're going to be discussing a lot of topics. For example, you might discuss a mentor that you had as a teacher. So you might look up something about mentorship and talk about that. You might discuss the importance of teachers' passions. And you might say this particular favorite teacher was very passionate. That's been demonstrated to be a critical characteristic of good teachers, and cite that. An appendix that's properly formatted. So don't put text in an appendix. Don't put something that you could put in the report in an appendix. What should go in an appendix? You might put a picture of your old school that you download from the web. You might put a chart or a graph and refer to it as we learned in the body of the paper, and give it its own little title page as we learned in Module 2. You'll want to refer back to Module 2 for some of these writing things. One or more references to match the citation. So remember, every citation must have a matching reference, and every reference must have a citation in the text. Take some time and make sure your citation and references are formatted correctly, because that will take off if they're not. Proof your paper for spelling and grammatical errors. Maybe let someone else prove it. And once you're satisfied that it's good to go, submit it to the link in the folder under Major Assignments. Now, if I give you feedback, then it's time to work on Part 2. So let's see what Part 2 consists of. Part 2 will be due 1 week after I grade Part 1. So you need to be checking the grading window after you turn your assignment in. I'd pop in once a day, see if it's graded. It can take me up to a week to get all the papers graded, so don't be alarmed if it's 5 or 6 days later and you don't see your paper back. But once I return the paper to you with my comments, the clock starts running on Part 2, and Part 2 is due a week after you get Part 1 back. What do you need to do? Well, first of all, you need to open up your paper and read my feedback that I give you, which are in the comments along the margin using Word comments. Figure out what you need to do to address each comment. A lot of them could be simple things like capitalization or punctuation. Some of them might be more substantive. Make those changes in red font or highlight them in some way so I can see them. Don't delete the comments and don't change your grade. Certainly don't delete the checklist that you'll see at the top of the assignment. Are you done then? No. Because after you do that, you're going to write a 2 to 3 paragraph reflection indicating what you've learned about your own teaching and about this assignment. So what did this process teach you about your desire to become a teacher and the type of teacher you want to be? The last section consists of 3 writing reflection questions. So this is different than the teaching reflection. This is about your writing. The first one is, what did this process teach you about your own writing? What will you take away from this assignment going forward to make you a better writer? And why is it important to be a professional communicator? Save your file, submit that all as one document. So you might have your document up top, your original document with the changes, and then your teaching reflection, and then your writing questions at the end. Save it all, submit it to the same link that you used to submit Part 1, and then I will grade it. The good news is, if you don't like your grade, your final grade, you get one more shot to revise everything, and then we'll call it quits. So again, Part 1, then Part 2, and then a total revision on both parts, and we call it quit. So how will your assignment be graded? It'll be graded with this scoring checklist, which is included in the set of instructions on the course site. First of all, I'm going to be asking you, did you describe your journey into teaching? How did you get into teaching? If you did that well, that's worth a point. If it's maybe some things are missing, we call that developing, and that's worth half a point. If it's missing, it's worth 0. Then we're going to describe I'm going to check to see if you describe the type of teacher you want to be. Again, if it did that well, worth a point, half a point for developing, 0 if it's missing. I'm going to see that you described your strengths and weaknesses similarly. And then the rest of the assignment is about writing. So for example, is the title page complete? Do you have a title and author, course, professor, and date? Is it properly formatted? Are the page numbers included? Is it double space? Is there at least one level of heading included? Is it properly formatted? I'm going to check to see if you have an appendix with appropriate content and whether that's formatted well, whether you have references that are properly formatted and match your citation, and whether you have few or no spelling or grammatical errors. That's the end of part one. Once you give me back part two with the changes, I'm going to make sure that you made almost all or all of your corrections, that you wrote an in-depth teaching reflection about what you learned about yourself as a teacher, whether you answered those writing questions that I mentioned, and that the whole thing has few to no spelling or grammatical errors. So that's it for the checklist. If you have any questions about this assignment, feel free to email me at nhalbrenner@mercy.edu. Thanks, everybody.